Welcome to the Housing Shift. I'm your host, Rajendram. Before we get into today's episode, a quick word from our sponsor. Service Charge Pro is the platform helping housing providers fix messy, spreadsheet-based service charge processes. Service Charge Pro was built to make accuracy easier, compliance simpler, and to help rebuild resident trust. If you're in housing and service charges are a pain point, check out Service Charge Pro. Link in the comments below. Right, on to the episode. Okay, welcome to episode 6 of the Housing Shift. This episode is called Listening with Impact, Getting Resident Engagement Right. With me today, I have Deborah Viljoen. Deborah, how are you doing?
Good morning, Raj. All well, thank you.
Good. Great to have you on the podcast. And so, Deborah, I've known you for a few years now. You were one of the main driving forces in MTVH, partnering with my company BRX and building Service Charge Pro in partnership with MTVH. Huge respect and admiration and gratitude for the work you've been doing there. But I found out recently that you've also been in housing for 30 years. Is that right?
Yes, it is, Raj, and I do feel old.
That is incredible. I was literally reminiscing with a group of people yesterday about when I started in housing, which is a paltry 18 years ago, and how I started out in finance, and we had paper invoices with like paper slips where people wrote the coding on and stuff, and when it came to the pay run deadline, people would literally run across the office to like jam it into the tray before the laminated cut-off said, no, you're done. What was 30 years ago in housing like? Could you give us a flavour?
Yeah, so and the paper was real, wasn't it, back then?
Yeah, for
And
sure.
I remember the first organisation I started with, still have a big affection for them, and it was really interesting because my first decade in housing was in property repairs, all of that side of things, which I really enjoyed. And even when I looked at MTVH when I started, there was still a staff member there who was from the merged organisations that I was his line manager. I thought it was 20 years ago. It was more like 25 years ago when I
No
went to say
way.
goodbye to him last week. Yeah, and bless him, absolutely lovely person. And you learn so much from different sort of aspects of housing, and I've been lucky enough to touch on quite a wide sort of variety of different services that I've been involved in delivering. But going back to the start in 30 years ago, the head of service didn't even switch his computer on, and that's the truth.
Don't you wish you could do that now some days?
Well, do you know what do we do? What would we do without this tech? Because it is actually quite significant and it does help. I know it can go wrong and I know it can be a nuisance and I know there's boundaries with it, but it still does make the journey easier, and it helps us support the resource side of things as well, right? Because those computer brains can really shift that data much quicker than we can.
For
Um,
sure.
but equally, I remember the massive in trays of invoices that had to be paid and literally piled so high. And I can't believe now looking back that that's how we were operating, but we still managed to deliver the service, right? And even the naughty things like certain individual seniors smoking in their offices. I mean, wow, could you imagine that these days? You just couldn't.
Wow.
But equally, I know, Raj, honestly. But equally, to stay in touch with people that I worked back then and still now was a delight. It was a delight to turn up at MTVH to know that there was somebody there who was a director that I'd worked with back in that office, and it was lovely. And I think that's the big thing about being in housing 30 years. You remember people and you gather them along the way and you stay in touch with them. That's lovely. That bit I love. And also all the stuff that I've learned that actually I look back now and realize my main driver was to help the residents full stop and make sure that their experience of being a tenant or a homeowner in our properties was actually a good one. And that's always been something that I've held quite deeply. But yeah, it's interesting.
No, that's a great segue onto the subject of today's episode. Firstly, yeah, what a brilliant history, and I can't believe people were smoking in offices. Well, I can, but also I can't, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, what an era.
So for today's topic, it's something that I know you obviously just shared that you're passionate about. It's something I'm very passionate about. Resident engagement. It's always been there. I think when we talked about this a little while back, I was saying it. When I first started in the housing, again, it was sending a few letters out to a few people, and it was just miles apart from what it is now. A few survey letters, that is. There seems to be a lot more focus around it now. It's become a bit more of a critical issue. Why would you say that is?
On the listening to residents and the engagement piece,
Yeah,
I think because times have changed, and there's a recognition, which is a positive one, that we need to help people more than we ever did, and we're not just a landlord that takes the money and makes sure the property's at a certain standard. We need to listen when things maybe a little bit over and above that needs to be delivered, and that covers a raft of things, from I don't know, making sure there's a community situation going on. If we're doing major works to a block, that we're listening to what the residents of that block want, all the way through to people can fall on hard times, and how do we support them to stay in their homes, with the support funds and things like that. And they're really important. And the thing that I see is the biggest change in that is that we're actually listening to our shared owners and accepting that they're not just a homeowner and they need to pay for everything, and that's how it is, and almost casting them aside. And that's the bit that I really appreciated, is to do that wraparound support as a landlord that isn't just dismissing them as a payer of a purchased property. We need to step it up for them as well, and that's good. I like that. And I just think the engagement bit of listening to our residents is really important, because actually we're great for just bulldozing ahead and doing what we think's right, but actually, is it right? Is it right for that community, that block, that individual? Not always. And it takes me back to conversations that I've had, even as recent as joining MTVH, with the teams that deliver the planned and major works. Is, if it's not a health and safety issue, the money in the sinking fund is theirs. We need to ask them if they want those works this year, and if they don't and the building's okay, we can ballot and get their opinions, and then push it back a year or two, so they can just establish a bit more funds in the sinking funds to make sure they can cover the costs. Those things are important, and that's part of listening and engaging.
absolutely. And it sounds like so that dynamic of relationship needs to change, or is in the process of changing. I think when we talked about this before, it's kind of a bit. It has been quite parent-child historically, and that mindset needs to shift. Is that right?
I think so. I think there's been a bit of an authoritarian approach. We're the landlord, and you'll do as we say, and this is what we're doing, and we're doing to them, rather than actually listening about what's wanted. And we assume we know what's wanted, and that's where we fall short as landlords, and that lack of listening, and that's the key bit. And if there's one thing I could say, is I'm really appreciative of how receptive other departments and teams have been that interact with our homeowners and listen to me when I've asked them to give them their voice and their choice, introducing something like balloting, where we ask their opinion and get back the votes and go with the majority. That's really important, and I appreciate it as well. And it's really nice to know that my colleagues and peers have been listening to me on this, and let's hope that they continue to do this, because I think it sounds a bit sort of almost kish to say let's put their voice first, and actually let them lead the way. But I think that's what we need to do. I think we need to stop that authoritarian sort of mentality and actually be almost a collaborative landlord, if that makes sense. It's just my take on it.
Absolutely. No, no, I agree. I agree totally. What, and also that I think you sort of talked around it in your response there, but that kind of mindset where there's kind of one policy across all the stock, all every block, every estate, that needs to change as well, because as you said, a certain group of residents in one block may want something different to another, and if it's not a health and safety issue, then we need to be able to be flexible around those.
And it's deeper than that, Raj, as well. So it's not just about, your planned works delivery and all of that
Mm,
kind of thing, and how you're actually managing and maintaining the block. It's the other policies as well that we have. We were quite authoritarian, for example, before lockdown about no pets. Because you shouldn't have pets in a block, and why? So I challenged that at a previous organisation. Why should we
mm.
have no pets? And it was because there was an individual resident who had, it was a really sad circumstance, and all she had left of her partner that she'd lost was her dog, and it was really important that she kept the dog. And I just sat there and thought, well, what harm is the dog doing? So manage that, manage people being allowed to have pets. And so we changed the policy. I was able to get a change in that policy through to allow the difference of actually having a pet, but having it managed well, having a photograph, having it registered, having your animal insured, and having it microchipped, and just managing and maintaining that. And what a difference! Because actually, it's been recognised that even the government, following that, recognised that people should be allowed to have pets in their home, and it's actually really helpful for people's well-being. So that was a significant change from being the authoritarian landlord to say absolutely not, to actually let's allow it but manage it a little bit differently. I really appreciated that, and I thought it was quite important as well. And obviously, as you know, I'm a big pet lover, so that ticked all my boxes, right?
Any horses in the blocks or?
Well, look, we won't go there, but I've never been asked to give permission for a horse, but that would be a hard one to say no for me.
Noted. No, but I think that was a really good example of where, you highlighted at the start there needs to be a mindset shift, but also there needs to be practical measures and there needs to be support to actually help those scenarios and help that resident need be fulfilled. So what, in terms of kind of resident engagement and delivery in making that more meaningful, what have you learned about what works and what doesn't over the past few years?
Yeah, with engagement, it's really interesting. I remember there's a couple of things I think that really support what does work. What doesn't work is believing what residents want and not actually listening. And so there's an element of taking time to sit and listen to what residents want, and it's about how you do that. And I think it's really key that you almost have a strategy. And it sounds a bit sort of, oh, that's a buzzword. No, it's not. It's just, it's you plan your resident piece, and how you will do that engagement. And it's really important because actually where, for example, on service charges, where you've got blocks that have got tricky service charges. For example, you might have managing agent involvement, costs are high, there's lots going on, there's dissatisfaction with certain elements of the management of that block. Well, preempt that, and preempt it by planning your engagement meetings beforehand, so when you're going to send out, for example, the service charge actuals, or you're sending out your estimates, and have those meetings in the diaries ready with key stakeholders from your organisation. So get the right peers in on the meeting, and then have that opportunity to listen to your residents and talk to them about why the costs have been whatever level, and understand any queries and questions, and make sure that you're prepared for those meetings as well. Don't just go there without understanding how costs have been set from, for example, budget holders. I'm just talking things like maybe grounds maintenance or your M&E budget, and then make sure that you are able to answer the questions. And those questions you can't answer, you keep scheduling those meetings in until you've answered them all. That's really key. And it's almost like targeting your resource to make sure that, from your teams and your organisation, to make sure that your residents are satisfied with the responses. And sometimes you may have got it wrong. It happens, and be prepared to be flexible and adjust with that as well. So if you think a cost is unreasonable, your residents do, and you've dug into it, be brave enough to make those changes, and don't just accept what you've done is right, or it's too late to change. It's never too late. So be prepared to adjust costs and figures accordingly, and work with your residents on that, because that's the collaborative piece. It's really important.
Thank you. So the key lessons are being present, being prepared, and also just having humility to be able to
Always.
change.
Always. And flexibility, right? So you need to be able to flex, and you need to be able to listen, Raj, because that's the key bit. We think we are listening, and actually we make an awful lot of assumptions there. And
Mm,
I think the key bit is to actually listen and work out. We're all smart enough to know how to solve a problem and work out how you're going to resolve those issues for your residents. And sometimes you need to think outside the box as well. You know, you may be giving them a sort of service delivery and a certain menu of frequency of attendance, for example, for cleaning. They may not want that. Well, listen to them. And if they don't want it, you can always trial things for 3 to 6 months and see if it works. And that's the flexible bit. And then go back if it's not, and have that conversation again. Just continue that engagement. Don't just leave it static.
yeah, absolutely. It's like having a cycle of sort of continuous improvement, if you like, with the residents in that kind of collaborative space that or mindset that you talked about earlier.
It's not, it's continuous engagement. I think that's the
Mm.
key. So it's not just static. It's not just a one-off. Pre-book those meetings. You know which are your tricky sort of blocks that have got issues, and you make sure that you record and track them, which is something that I've introduced at MTVH in particular. And you make sure that your teams are ready to do that collaborative piece going forward, and it really does help. And it gets things in a better place for your residents as well, because I think the key thing here is just to remember it's their home, and they need to be happy in their home. And without that sounding a bit cliche, it's more to do with not just giving them the voice, but giving them the power to actually make those decisions rather than us do them carte blanche, as reverting back to that authoritarian mentality. So yeah. Also, don't underestimate that you may need to be flexible on how the information comes back. But also, I think the bit that I probably didn't say, and I want to add to that, is about the responsiveness. So, respond back, copy minutes, do the actions, all those bits that you agree, put everything in writing, have an email group for the residents of the block, and even better, have a TRA, a residents association, and do that bit.
Yeah, I mean that fits that continuous engagement model that you talked about. So that's really clear about some ways that you can go about and provide some more effective resident engagement in terms of balancing this activity alongside your existing operational constraints. We know how busy and how under pressure so many teams are in housing. The regulations changing, adding more and more pressure onto them. How have you found that your teams have been able to kind of balance delivering all of that kind of sort of day job, if you like, alongside the need to have more resident engagement and better resident engagement?
So there's a lot in that, actually, and you're right, they are under pressure. I think all of housing's under pressure right now. And you've been looking at the noise that's not just on LinkedIn, but just in the sector. And it's there for a reason. And you've got local authorities that are under significant pressure because they were disinvested in from central government from 2011 onwards. And it's taken its toll on local authorities trying to operate. And the same with, you know, uh, housing associations or registered providers. So we've not got the same guys as a local authority, but we're still there providing, the housing supply. And I think the key thing is that regulatory change is significant. However, some of it was really desperately needed. And I go back to my time in the local authority in 2016, I think it was 2017, when the Green Paper came out, which was about the unfair practices in leasehold. And actually, it was necessary, Raj, because there were some, and it wasn't fair. And there were some basic things that were just wrong. For example, not enabling a shared owner any rights to do a lease extension. I mean, back then it was seen as, they weren't a qualifying leaseholder, but that wasn't fair. So I remember responding to it and my time in the local authority to that paper on behalf of them. And actually, I was really pleased to see it shift into the white paper. And to be fair, that's really what's fed into the Leasehold and Freehold Reform Act that was delivered last year. And it's still not bottomed out with all the bits that are coming through. But what a difference it's made to acknowledging things like the enfranchisement and the right to manage. And I was really glad to see that. But that adds the pressure. And also, we've got the consumer standards that have come in from the regulator, which are really clear about understanding the feedback from your residents, for example, and also the voice piece, listening to your residents. How do you evidence that? And it's great because actually we should have been doing that already. So the problem is that course brings change, and change brings the transformation where you've got to put resource into delivering that transformation. So you're right, that is the pressure, and it's key. But equally, I think balancing that is, being prepared. I feel a bit lucky with it as well because I could see where that was going when I answered those initial papers. So this hasn't come as a surprise to me or the sector, to be fair. And I think just to be able to pre-plan, because planning helps with identifying resource and getting things through the door. And I think the other side of this is also that enabled me to look at what resources actually needed without a shadow of a doubt. A customer excellence or a customer engagement person for homeowners I saw was an absolute need, and so I introduced that. And actually, what a brilliant role to mop up all the bits and get traction with other teams when things aren't getting resolved or addressed. And it does help. And I guess I'm stepping into the bit about magic wand there and to wave that across all the sector, right? But that helped support bringing the balance of not taking up the team who's super busy delivering their day job, but actually overseeing things when it needs to get delivered. I've also utilized technology for that as well in twofold, Raj. So I think, the Teams is a great platform to be able to collaborate with your peers across the organization and pull them all into regular meetings, store your files, track all your actions and make sure things get delivered, and have those quick chats. Just a little one liner to update everybody on that platform without sending hundreds of emails to everyone's inbox.
Yeah,
We
agreed.
know we're in a culture of massive volume of emails. We know that. So anything that reduces that is a win-win for me. Again, supporting resource. So that digital piece is really, really key. And it helps you to get a quick oversight. I probably shouldn't admit this, but I'm often in meetings looking at actions being delivered for other casework, but it helps, right? And it means I get that quick snapshot and I know things are being done, which is great. On the other side of that, I think it's not just a digital piece, it's the staffing piece. There's a training element there as well, isn't there? So investing in your teams, making sure that you do that piece where you understand what's going on as the leader and that you're able to disseminate that training. And if you're not able to deliver it because you're busy, you've got things going on, make sure you tap into those resources the sector makes available for that training so that your teams are aware. And that's a part of their career progression as well, right? Because we should be doing that. We should be upskilling everybody more and more. And it's not just about getting tick box exercise qualifications. It's about the ongoing stuff that goes on through the weeks, the months, and the changes that may just pop in, and or what does best practice look like. Sort of reach out to your peers and ask them. That's really important. So all of that wrapped up, I think, helps with the pressure, and it helps upskill. I read a really interesting article on LinkedIn about sunrise and sunset jobs. With the change with all the technology, and I just thought we're definitely approaching this as a sunrise area, because the upskilling will add to that and add to the confidence that your teams will have to deliver with any of these complex situations and queries they may get, and have to sort of resolve with residents and all of the issues that go on. And I think that's really, really key.
That's great. I mean, some really key practical steps there for other housing leaders, other organisations in terms of getting organised, using technology well and effectively, upskilling your team. You mentioned there that there were some kind of centrally available resources. Is that right?
Yeah, so there are some organisations in the sector, particularly for home ownership and leasehold. One of them is the Housing Quality Network, who I love because I've learnt a lot from them over my 30 years in housing. But they do help with, hitting on the current issues and offering training, having the conversations, and they've got a leasehold excellence network, which is really valuable. And also you can get data off them to benchmark if you're doing something like looking at your fees or anything and get your best practice from them. So I think they're really useful, and I've always had a soft spot for HQN, and when I get the opportunity I do try and do a keynote speaker slot with them. Um, and I think the other thing is as well, don't ever underestimate that website for lease advice, right? Because that is really key. And I was lucky enough in the summer to be asked to speak at the Inside Housing conference on the resident engagement bit. And it was lovely. And I was on a panel with two wonderful speakers, and, they reams of experience and really knowledgeable. And one of them was this lovely lady who heads up lease advice. And, we were asked a question, where do you get your knowledge from and your information? And both myself and another leader in the G15 said, from your website and lease advice, because you're on it and we know it. And it's so true. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
That's great. We'll put the links in the show notes. I think you raised an important point there. The last episode I recorded was with Joe Williams from Cell Housing Group. The sector doesn't talk enough about what's going well and share best practices. Well, we know there's conferences out there, but it feels like there needs to be more so that people can learn lessons from other sites and then, as you said, engage with their peers more. I mean, is that how you?
Yeah, definitely. And also don't underestimate the fabulous organisations, National Housing Fed, who I
Mm.
think are brilliant, and Chartered Institute of Housing. They have real experts, lots of knowledge. They do conferences regularly, and I think, do reach out and just look at what's going on there and get your name on the list to go and attend them, because you will learn so much. And also, you'll network and meet others in the across the country, where you actually can start to share best practice and have those conversations and open up. It really does help. It sounds a bit cliche, but it's not. That's a really key thing. Keep your eye on LinkedIn as well, right? There's lots of good stuff being shared on there. I follow all sorts of random things, but I pick things up, right? And I think even like information, and the Shared Ownership Council, by the way, I had a look at some information that they did on the satisfaction piece. Absolutely brilliant. Honestly, really, really good intel and information, and all of these things are really helpful, because you start to almost build a 3D picture around yourself as to where we are within the sector and where the sector is and who's doing what, and actually where you need to start stepping up and start planning for where you're going to step up to actually make things better. And all of these bits of insight are really helpful as well.
Awesome. So, Deborah, we're on to the final question, which the tradition we have on the podcast is to give our guests a magic wand. So, if you could change one thing across the sector and how we involve residents, and if you could have a magic wand and that would happen tomorrow, what would that be?
Wowza. So magic wand, I would love one. I think there's lots of things, and I think the digital offer is really, really key. So, channel shifting onto residents' portals, communicating electronically, particularly for our homeowners. They're busy at work, and just to get a ping of something they can read whilst they're doing other things is helpful. We all know that. That's what we prefer. Having apps, all of that good stuff as well, so you can access things really quickly. But making sure that your portals are fit for purpose. Make sure you can share lots of information on them and they're not just one dimensional. That's really key and really helpful. And I think that part of that digital offer is also actually internally for organisations. I've been so lucky to be able to build that system with you, Raj, and actually get that developed and through the door for service charges. It's probably, to me, the only bespoke service charge system we've got for RPs in the sector. I don't know of any others, but it does what we need it to do, not what an off the shelf system does that's maybe had a few tweaks. That's really, really key. When I look at one of the things I think it was the biggest game changer for our teams at MTVH was being able to issue those Section 21s and Section 22s. Anybody in service charges will know what those are, automatically at the press of a button. What an absolute delight. And there's lots of other things as well, I think, as well with the system, which is along the lines of actually engage your residents. So we were able to do that with Service Charge Pro, and we got what they wanted from the system on the transparency piece. And what does that look like? We translated the transparency piece by listening to them and building it into the system. And I just wish every organisation would actually be able to do that, because what a difference it would make for the residents, what a difference it would make for their teams who are under pressure, as we've recognised, and what a difference it would just make to being able to share that information and hitting the targets of transparency that we know we need to do in the sector. So that would be the first thing on the digital piece, without a shadow of a doubt. My other magic wand waving would be having that lead for home ownership on the engagement piece. And I don't mean customer voice, because they're a key central function for all organisations. Is all the work that they do with residents councils and scrutiny groups, but actually having dedicated homeowners who you are able to ping information over to and get feedback, and actually be able to convert that into changes internally. So that's the ultimate piece. But also your engagement resource internally, have a lead in your departments of home ownership, whoever that is, that will pick that piece up, work with the residents as well, but also work internally to troubleshoot almost, and identify where resident engagement is needed to keep the pace going so that it's delivered, and also ensure that all those actions are targeted and resolved. That's really important, and I think actually that is a really key function to identify where you start to get lots of themes through. For example, on your CRMs of issues in a particular block, that they will pick them up, collate all of them, go to all the other departments, pull them in, and make sure that they target engagement with those residents to resolve those issues. That definitely, I think, would be a wonderful thing for every group to have. And involving residents in projects as well, that's really, really key. And I would say that because it's not just about service charges, it's about all the other services we deliver as well, and them getting access to those services, but doing it so that it's easy. Good customer experience and once and done is great, but actually it needs to be easy to use those services. And I think that residents having a key eye on projects being delivered that affect them will always see that angle. And that's an amazing piece of intel that you would not get anywhere else.
Thank you, Deborah. So you had three magic ones there, apparently, but
I've got another one.
we loved every response. I
Am I
would just
allowed a
like.
fourth one, Raj? Am I allowed a fourth one, or am I pushing my luck? Because I
Go
do
on.
like to push my luck.
Let's hear it. Go on. Let's hear it.
Okay, so the final one is actually, it's the sector change that we need, and this is going to sound a little bit sort of trite, but I don't mean it like that. I just mean that we need to not just listen, but that is key, and we need to be kind. Our fundamental driver here is to keep people in their homes,
Mm.
whether they're a shared owner, or an owner occupier leaseholder or a tenant. Everybody needs to be kept in their homes, and we need to do that as kindly as we can. So think outside the box, start looking at how you support. One of the things that I've been doing, which is really key, the minute any of our residents in any communication to, whether it's the service charge team, whether it's the home ownership team, mention the word affordability, it's picked up straight away, and there is contact from that team that manage the support piece, because we need to see if they need extra help. and have those funds sitting there waiting. And it could be for any reason. Life changes, it happens, and people can lose jobs, or they can have a loss of a family member. All of these things can affect income. And if you think that somebody needs a bit of support, maybe they've got one set of arrears that just need clearing so they can continue to live in their home, then that's what we do. And I would love to see that across the sector.
Well, I'm glad I gave you the fourth one because
Thank
yeah,
you.
I think that's a wonderful use of the wand. Yeah, no, some really awesome suggestions there. With the first two, I just want to add that I didn't ask you to big up Service Charge Pro, but happily agree with you, obviously, and I'm really proud of the work that we've been able to get done there, and providing that better transparency for residents and that better service is central to how we designed it. But with I agree with you with your driver for getting a dedicated person in. I've seen how that works at MTVH, and I've just seen how that person is then advocating on behalf of the residents internally, and that's really important because it's not just, as you said, having someone there kind of focused around doing this piece of work. It's someone there just kind of chasing people up internally on behalf of the resident because they've got access to them. But those two things, great. But obviously take some resourcing input, some time, some money. But yeah, certainly the last one, that's something that you can just do for free, right? You can just have a mindset shift. You can just change the way you approach how you manage everybody that is a resident for your organisation. And I think that's just a really good lesson for everyone.
Yeah, be kind.
Be
That's it.
kind.
And
Be
we should be
kind.
doing that to everyone anyway,
Yeah,
and not
for
just our
sure.
residents, but generally. And it's hard because we're overwhelmed with social media where there's lots of negativity and things. That's not the reality. The reality of life is actually most people are really lovely, and I will say that, Raj, because it's true. So yeah, just be kind and see that you've got the gifts and the skills to help. Do it.
What a lovely way to end the podcast. Be kind. Deborah, thank you. It's been a pleasure as always speaking to you.
Likewise, Raj.